Welcome to the Portland Film Festival 2020. It's different, but it's still here, and we are still loving films. And this one, as always, is presented by Comcast. We want to thank Comcast team for tremendous support and all the great hoodies that I've gotten with the word Comcast on the back from all my years going to and attending and helping out at Portland Film Festival. So thank them very much. We also need to thank the Kerner Camera, Cleaner Path, SAG, AFTRA, Plumtree Mortgage, and Oregon Film. And you can find more information about all those great guys and tickets to the festival at pdxff.com. Now, we got that all out of the way. I'm Leroy Mag. I'm hosting this Q&A with McKenzie Woodard. McKenzie is the director of a great little film that I just saw yesterday that I personally just adore. I love this film. Can't wait to talk about it. It's called Mr. Weekend. And so we're just going to jump right in, man. McKenzie, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good, man. Just chilling out here in Los Angeles. How you doing?
Yeah. I'm good. I'm down here in Oregon, South Central Oregon. I'm not up at the festival either, man. It's all, so much of it is remote, man. Brave new world.
I know. Welcome, new normal.
Yeah. But as far as films go, this is one of those films I kind of wish I could have seen at the theater, because I think that seeing it with a crowd would have been kind of nice, because it's kind of got that young energy vibe. But before I sit here and gush over how much I like your film, why don't you tell us about Mr. Weekend? First of all, where did you come up with this idea for Mr. Weekend? But and before we start, why don't you go ahead and tell us about Mr. Weekend?
I'd say it's a noir-noir. It's a film noir. It's a neo-noir set in Black or people of color paradigm. Set in modern day Los Angeles. It's about a bookie that happens to, luck upon 4 pounds of Crystal LSD, and the hijinks that I guess would ensue with that.
Yeah, no, that's a good word for it, hijinks, because this film, I think one of your characters even said, I like roller coasters, not merry-go-rounds. And so that's exactly what this is. This is a roller coaster of a film. Did you always intend to shoot it in black and white?
Yes. When I was, thinking of, a movie I wanted to shoot, Mr. Weekend kind of came about when I was, I just want to shoot a film, like a feature. And I don't want to shoot a single location horror, not to disparage those, but I, kind of thought about what genres are done on the cheap in film noir, originated. The first film noir film I think was shot on a Warner Brothers backlot, or something like that. So I just decided I wanted to do a noir film with Black people, which as I sadly was going through the films that I'd watched, I realized there hadn't been one yet. So it kind of inspired me to create one. And so that's kind of how the film came about as an idea.
Okay. So you said that you did some research. What were your big influence? Because I looked at the film and I saw tons of little things that I'd seen in other films and other kind of influences that I was like, wow, I haven't seen that in a while. And wow, that's a completely different take. And wow, this has its own unique feel. So what were some of the influences for you? Because I saw kind of what some people would say were a lot.
I'd say, oh man, there's so much. Sweet Smell of Success was a big, it's probably one of my favorites. Night of the Hunter. I don't know if a lot of people, that's usually
a deep cut, yeah.
My favorite film. It's been my favorite film since, the first time I saw it, I think when I was 12. And, the car scenes, like there was so much debate with, other people on, the creative team about, I wanted the cars to have that silent film,
yeah,
for lack of a better word, cheesy appearance, because I always loved that about film noirs. And there would be like some people like, oh, it's going to look so fake and corny, and it's like, yeah, that's part of the pache feeling I wanted to for a first film, I wanted to make something that was an homage to the films that I've always loved, and influences came from all over. But generally, a lot of them, were some of my favorite noirs that aren't necessarily the really famous ones. Act of Violence is a really enjoyable one that inspired me, as well as Ace in the Hole. That's another one I really enjoyed, as well as going further to, of course, I think you'll like a lot of people can spot some Tarantino influences, or Brian De Palma. So I'd say it came from everywhere.
Well, first of all, I like the car scenes, and I think that because it was shot in black and white, it worked way better than if you would have shot it in color. I think it just it fit the aesthetic that you had come up with. Well, I think you made the right choice personally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna direct some certain people to this.
Yes, send them to, because it fit the feel. It's even though it's modern, it's shot in black and white. It still has that old feel, even though you see modern phones. I mean, some of the vernacular you use. There's some, there's a few, old timey voice. I haven't heard a Vig referred to in a long time in a film, so that was good. Speaking of Vig and Charlie being a bookie, did you know much about the the bookie world? Because I kind of felt like I was getting an education while I was watching this. It's like,
I actually did, but the beauty of the internet is I actually ended up chatting with 3 bookies. One in I'm not gonna one was in London.
yeah.
Another was somewhere in the Midwest, and another was somewhere in the East Coast. And one thing you'll find is people in a lot of these lines of work love to talk about it in a non in an off the record standpoint, just like the nature of the business. So I just ended up having a few online conversations with actual bookies, which oddly enough, most of the time they're not as nefarious as you would assume. They're, especially in the modern age. But then again, it's a dying profession because of internet. So that's what a lot of people be moaning, would be like, oh, back in the old days when I could break people's legs, and stuff like that. Funny.
Oh man, that's good. Okay, and part of what I think makes Charlie such a great character, and I really wanted to ask you about Charlie, is so Charlie's a bookie who's done some time for breaking and entering, that he says, and you definitely get the first impression, like right off the bat, Charlie's not necessarily built for this. Was that kind of intentional, that Charlie, you see Charlie, they talk about Charlie's just a little soft, like you always hear people talk about, you feel like he's a good guy and this is just his day job and it's nothing more beyond that, like this is part of his life, he doesn't feel like he quite fits. Was that intentional?
I feel like, if part of a noir is that, lack of ability in the characters, because if the character is actually apt for that world, it's a gangster film.
Yeah.
And it becomes a very different set of tropes that you're dealing with. There's reams of debate and, essays written on what exactly defines a noir film. I believe, a amateur trying to duplicate a noir film is just going to focus on, expressionistic lighting, shadow, and, old school jargon and pacing of dialogue, which is really just surface level of what makes a noir. Often you have a character, as I've, interpreted it, you've had a character that is down on his luck, in some sense, and in an attempt to better his, status, enters into, some element of, the criminal world that he, isn't really equipped for. And, I think that on top of other elements, like a cynical view of, human nature and, other tropes that I think have grown into the genre over time. But when I was writing Charlie, initially you want to write a character that's badass and, can do all these things. But as I was writing that, it just, I started realizing this isn't really fun. I mean, if the guy's able to handle all this, it stops necessarily being something of the mind, and it always ends up just creeping into a displays of violence. And then the violence doesn't mean anything. Like, your average gangster film, you'll see somebody die in the first 5 minutes. And then the tension's really gone. It's really just a matter of like, well, how long is he going to be able to make this last?
Yeah. No, I think the character is more compelling. I think if it was a different character or a hardened character, we would have a 30-minute film and it wouldn't have been nearly as fun. I mean, I think part of the fun of Charlie, part of the fun of a lot of films is the part of I think I would have done that, but Charlie's a really relatable character. He does have kind of a 9 to 5 vibe to him. And he is kind of a good guy. Like, I like Charlie. Like, I related to Charlie because I was like, okay, if that's me, I would probably be a Charlie in that world. I'd like to pretend that I'm the big gangster with all the money and stuff. But in reality, I think most of us would be like Charlie, like, okay, this is my life. This is my opportunity to get out. And speaking of getting out, the Crystal LSD that literally shines like diamonds when you open it. Was that something that you specifically, when you put in the script, it was just like, these things shine, they're like diamonds, they are the diamonds of the drug?
That's another interesting story. So, I didn't go to film school. I actually, was a biology major, but, so I was always like, oh, I don't want to do typical cocaine. And, I remember when I was, studying in college, realize, like, you learn that actually, like, the most lucrative drug business to be in is LSD. It's just, you have to actually know how it works, how to make it and stuff. It's not an easy drug to make. So as I was, I was like, well, you know what, I'm going to do something with that. So I ended up getting in touch with somebody that, like, this was through some weird online channels, like, but eventually I got in touch with a chemist out in Amsterdam who, was able to explain, like, the whole process. And actually LSD crystals glow, not like they do in the movie, but in real life they do emit light when you have them, not like, to the stylized extent in the film. But I just decided to hype that up as I was shooting, because it's a noir and shadow has an effect.
No, it definitely worked, because it gave an extra element for me, because when I saw it, it was like, it associates with diamonds, so its worth was always just, I mean, it felt like it was worth more than if it was just a box of rocks. And so that's what it gave to me. Like, when it shines, it's like, okay, that's worth something. Because, you speak of Tarantino influences, like, I immediately thought of when the briefcase opened. I was like, okay, that's worth something. Mm-hmm. Like that, I never doubt. Like, if you show me a bag of drugs and say it's worth $6 million, I'll probably buy it. You show me a bag of drugs that emits light and looks like diamonds, you tell me it's worth $6 million, then I'm invested. I'm in. I'm like, okay, I can get that bag.
Oh, wow, okay.
I like that. No, so now, as a filmmaker, you're in it now. You're doing festivals. This is kind of an odd time. What have some of your impressions have been about, like, how your film has been received? Like, what are some of the conversations you've had with other people that you kind of realized on the outside looking in? Because as any filmmaker knows, like, it's you're kind of in the woods, and then you kind of come out, and then you start to talk to other people. Have there been any things about your film that like, wow, man, I didn't think you were going to get that out of this? You were kind of
I mean, that was kind of like, nobody really thought I was going to be able to, I think, come out of. I mean, there's lots of very, very capable people that have set out to make films and haven't been able to, finish them because, I mean, honestly, a big factor is luck. I can tell you like 5 instances where I just got lucky, in a lot of respects. And I guess it was funny because when I had the premiere and, I was like, hey, everybody come see my film. Everybody was sort of like going into it like, okay, we're going to go support our friend. It's like, fake our smiles and, all that other stuff. And, this, like, I could see even like in fringes of people in my family. I mean, they were always supportive, but I think they were all sort of bracing for like, okay, we're supporting our, cousin, our brother.
Get our faces, get our faces ready. Yeah.
And so it was really sort of funny, like what, because you sit in the theater and, you're like watching people and you're like, I just got to step out. But when people kind of came out, there was that sort of look of just sort of, it was surprise. Like a lot of people were just, the most consistent compliment I got was, about 30 minutes into the movie, I forgot I was watching my friend's movie and I was just watching a movie.
Oh man, that is a big compliment.
And that was, coming from, I come from a family where we're all kind of like competitive with each other. So, compliments are given only when truly due. And so when the fact that it was like, I had people being like, hey, that was actually a really good movie. I was just like, oh, that's quite a nice thing to hear. I'm not saying like I don't come from, very supportive people. They are, but there was genuinely a surprise. Like my, co-producer, Kristen, she, had all these, friends at very like fancy agencies that did all this fancy branding work. And so, they had come to see the movie thinking they were just supporting a friend and, they were rather surprised with the film too. So I think there's that element of like, thank you and fuck you. Like, the thank you for liking the movie, but fuck you for like, what were you expecting when you were coming to see this? And a lot of them were just like, I thought it was going to be terrible, man. Like most, of these, independent efforts.
Gonna go support my friend, put my smile on. Oh yeah, it was good. Then you go, just you guys.
I mean, we've all been there, right?
So
I mean, that's part of the film. Like, trust me, I've had that experience as a filmmaker, with some shorts of mine. So I mean, it's part of the experience. But I was glad that it wasn't part of this experience of Mr. Weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of you being a filmmaker, looking at the credits, you're directing, you're writing, you're producing, you're running a camera, you're running another camera. I'm pretty sure, I think I saw you on craft services at one point. Now, as an independent filmmaker, you know as well as anybody else that ever does independent film, you wear a lot of different hats. So how was that experience wearing so many different hats and then just doing a cameo in your own film too? What was that like, having all these different hats on at the same time, being the guy who's like, well, if this doesn't work, I can't blame it on this guy or this guy. I'm all these guys. There's no one that I can say, okay, well, they dropped the ball.
Well, I mean, I know how annoying it is when you see one of like these projects that has somebody's name on, so many of the titles, but that was really like, I couldn't afford to, pay somebody, especially since, there's this sort of, duplicitous type of producer that takes advantage of people, like, has a lot of people working for free. And I never really wanted to be that type of person. Well, not that type of producer, especially starting out. I'm sure, if we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in a film, whatever, I'm joking. But when I was starting out, I never I'd been on a few legitimate film sets when they've had all the bells and whistles, but you know, I came up doing independent projects. Like I never went to film school. So everything I learned on the fly. So a lot of the time I didn't know you were supposed to have PAs that, like I was just, I'm not going to pay them. It's like, we don't have to pay them, but I didn't want to do that. So I started out just thinking like the way my film education worked is I, had worked on every position enough that I can annoy people that work those positions dedicated. Like, I know enough about sound that I can be annoying to a sound person or a camera person or so on. So whenever I could always just be there to pick up slack if something was, missing. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody because it's definitely, I mean, it'll put you into some dark moments, when you're doing night shoots for 14 hours but of course you're telling a story, so that always keeps you going.
So with I just have to ask because there was a couple of scenes like the scene where he's in the lead, and I apologize, can't remember the head drug dealer's lair is with his harem of men, and there's one point where one of the guys has this toy panther and just kind of bumps Charlie with the toy panther, and I don't know why, but I busted out laughing. I thought that was hilarious. Did you find and anyone that's been on a set, you film, what were some happy accidents that happened on the film?
That was actually one of them.
That was awesome.
Yeah, Darnell, the dancer, he was a dancer, and I was just like, yeah, man, just dance there. I was trying to fill up negative space, and there happened to have been this toy panther that was sitting there, and he grabbed it, and I loved it. I was like, oh yeah, that's great. And I remember my production designer was just like, she was aghast at it, just like, that she thought it was so, like she didn't get it. But then when we were in the editing room, she was like, oh yeah, but that was one of those moments where it's important to try to make sure everybody's involved, or at least feels like they're involved, even somebody that's like an extra like that. And because it was such a open set in the sense, like, there was like me, a sound dude, and, my cinematographer / camera operator, that, you can actually hear when a extra's like, hey, could I try this? I think if there was a full on, cast and crew, you wouldn't necessarily, it's not like you wouldn't be open, but, why would you listen to an extra right now? You're dealing with so much other stuff. So, it did, everybody is a writer on set, I think, is an important thing. I can say that as a writer where, you're like, oh, it's my work and my words, but, an actor is writing as well, so even the background extras. Yeah. So, I think being open to that was probably the best thing learned from that experience. And that was actually a happy accident. I'm glad you caught it.
Yeah, no, I like that one. For some reason, it's, how's the saying go? It's just like, tension is holding your breath and a laugh is an exhale. And you had all these little moments throughout where, the tension would get kind of high, but then it would get cut with just the slightest bit of comedy. And it just would come at these little great times. And that was just one of those times where this guy just kind of goes, I'm laughing just thinking about it. I might go back and watch it after this.
Oh, thank you. I guess it was funny. I think, dark sense of humor, I think, is generally just a part of Black culture in general. Like we already deal with so much that, you always find that there's a way of laughing or finding humor in really dark moments. And often, points that I would like put in, I would think were funny, but I wouldn't necessarily cue in my brain as jokes as much as, it's just like, oh yeah, you'll just throw a little bit of that in there. And I really enjoyed hearing, often like when you watch it with the crowd, the sort of like, I don't know if I should laugh, you know, feeling that is really enjoyable, you know, as a writer to experience.
No, it's well, you pulled it off because there's more than a few moments. I mean, even the little moments like when Charlie goes back in to get the keys and he thanks Jack, you know, the guy he just killed. That just had that gave me a chuckle too. But I think it works because of the actors and the atmosphere you must have created on set. And I did want to take just a second and acknowledge and talk about just the cast you had and how did you come about that cast? Because it's a diverse cast of, I mean, when you look at their experience levels, their acting levels, the racial diversity, it's a very diverse set, and everyone kind of felt like they had an attitude. And a film that I thought about, oddly enough, which is probably about as far away aside from it being black and white, is Clerks. These small scenes, these tight scenes with just one or two people in them, just expounding exposition, but just doing it in such a way that it it doesn't feel scripted. It feels real, but at the same time, it feels real in a way that you just kind of almost hope your conversations go. Like it's just there's so much good back and forth where it's just like that's how you imagine your conversations went with your friends. They didn't, but that's how you kind of imagine when you look back on them. And so I just wanted you to just take a second and just kind of tell us about the cast. How did that come together?
You know, that was one of those points where I can say luck, you know, bless the film. Well, I mean, luck, and also I was lucky enough to, when I was setting out to make a movie, I decided I need to get a casting director. And so, you know, I found this woman named Kasia, who's, you know, this wonderful personality, pink everything, you know, but has an amazing eye for, you know, talent. And she, you know, she actually read the script and got it. And when we put out the casting calls, she was, you know, just great. She could spot, like, she went through and filtered out, you know, all these people and brought me, you know, so many choices. And then when we were going through the readings, some people just stand out, you know, like you. But oddly enough, then, you know, some crazy stuff happens. Like the guy that played the head gangster, his name's Leacock. He was originally cast as a number like 2, like one of the backup gangsters, and the guy that was playing, you know, him had some tantrum on set because, you know, it was like a small set, and, you know, he had originally read for the lead part, but he didn't get the lead part, and he was bitter about that. So he just stormed off set, you know, just like, screw this movie, you know, and just disappeared. So, you know, at that point, I was just like, oh, well, hey, do you want to be his, you want to take his part? And, you know, Leacock, you know, stood up. He was like, yeah, let's do it. Learn the lines. And, you know, his like go-to attitude, if you ever like get a chance and, you know, find yourself interviewing the guy, he's amazing. But, you know, now he's, you know, working on NBC shows and stuff, you know, just because.
Deservedly so, man. Yeah.
Yeah. He like, but everybody that like worked on the film was surprisingly talented. And that says a lot about LA. You know, like I met one of my composers for the film walking back from a corner store. You know, just, I mean, so I'd say, you know, there's a lot of talent, but also I think because we were open, I mean, we didn't have a budget to try to hire people, you know, based off of roles that we previously seen them in. You know, we were open to anybody that, you know, would come in and bring something to the cast. I mean, bring something to the movie. So in that sense, I think being open to anybody paid off in some ways.
Nice. Well, I do have to say, man, I like the film. I haven't seen the film. I haven't seen your B&B film before this one. I've seen this one. I'm gonna have to go try to hunt that down.
I was just an assistant director on that one. So
oh, you were? Forget
yeah.
IMDb. I don't want that. I want your next one, and that brings me to my next question. What are you doing next?
Well, you know, there's the film, when it played at a few other festivals, you know, garnered some interest in some of my next projects. And you know, right now there's like a few scripts floating out there, and unfortunately COVID has thrown a few hiccups and stuff. Now everything is, when they're looking to see what sort of movies they want to make, it's not just a matter of like, oh, how many locations and blah blah blah. Now they're looking at how will this fit with COVID restrictions, you know. So I'm, you know, plugging, I mean, oddly enough, I'm plugging away on the next script right now. You know, just took some time for this interview to, you know, talk to you guys. So I'd say in the next year or so, you'll be hearing, you know, something about the next movie that'll be coming from me.
Well, McKenzie, I look forward to it, man. Thanks for chatting with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. I seriously, if you guys haven't seen it, we're supposed to be conducting these interviews a little behind the scenes, a little fourth wall breaking. We're showing these interviews and doing these interviews under the assumption that you've seen the film. Some of you probably aren't. This is going to be on YouTube, but if you get the chance, whatever the meeting we have to go to, virtual festivals, they are a thing now. Please go hunt down your virtual festivals. Thank you for coming to the Portland Film Festival. We appreciate it greatly. Mike Pence's fly is in my apartment. All right, anyway. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting independent film. And please go and virtually vote. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, vote for McKenzie Woodard's film, Mr. Weekend. It's a good film. It's noir film. It's, you look at it and you just, it takes you back to those points where if you like independent film, if you like just passion on a low budget, this is one of those. This is one of those that this is the reason you go to film festivals, or for films like these. So please go out and support it. Oh, you're welcome, man. Please go out and support it. Support all the films at the festival. And what else is there to say except thank you. Please go to the Portland Film Festival website and again, virtually vote and check out other film festivals, check out other filmmakers. I know I shouldn't be quoting other film festivals or pumping other film festivals, but I am, because this is a really weird time that we're in, and these artists need our help. They need our support. If you're binge watching something on TV, there's somebody just like McKenzie out there that's plugging away, and those guys are fine. It's these guys out here that are at these festivals, doing these virtual festivals, that need our support. And this isn't something you're probably going to see, you know, on NBC, you know, at 8 p.m. on a Thursday. You're not going to see that here. You're going to see it at festivals. You're going to see this kind of passion at festivals. So please come out, please support. McKenzie, thank you again. And thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you kindly.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it, man. I'm going to be looking out for it. I really am. Thanks.
Appreciate it, buddy.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye now.